You know what the best-selling book on the market today is? It's this book. Have you seen it? Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Jonathan Livingston Seagull was written by a demon. It has sold more books than any hardback since Gone with the Wind. The author, as we know it, Richard Bach, is quoted in Time magazine, November 13th, 1972. There's a whole study on him. If you have that issue, read it. It's absolutely shocking. The book was launched with no publicity. It was rejected by a whole series of publishers, but when the devil wants to get his propaganda out, he keeps at it till he gets it out. It's kind of interesting, too, that when the devil finally got it out, it made a fortune, which is kind of a retribution for the guys who wouldn't publish it. 1 million of them sold in 1972. And until lately, the guy who wrote it, Bach, was a reader in the Church of Christ Scientist, a Christian Science. And you find much of Mary Baker Eddy's philosophy in this thing. He talks about the fact that there's no evil, there's no death, there's no birth, there's no nothing, there's no heaven, no hell, no God, no nothing. It teaches incarnation, reincarnation, and all these other things. It's typical demonic propaganda, but it's all in a very beautiful kind of framework. Time magazine says this: Bach feels he did not write the book, but a mysterious voice gave it to him. Bach believes in the voice totally. Late one night, he was strolling by a canal near Long Beach, and he heard a voice behind and to the right saying, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. The voice comes through to Bach like a three-dimensional movie. And as Bach writes it all down with green ballpoint pen, it shows and tells the story of Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Bach has since left his wife and 6 children. He says he cannot live with the impingements of marriage. Time magazine goes on. Bach is wedded to Jonathan and to its source of inspiration. You know what it means? It means Bach is demon-possessed. Time magazine goes on. Recently he discovered Jane Roberts, a poet and a writer, who since 1963 has been a conduit for the spoken words of another demon called Seth. This demon has the name Seth. It's all done in daylight, says Bach. There's just this one small middle-aged woman in a rocking chair, Jane Roberts. When Seth speaks, her voice deepens, and even the lines of her face seem to change. I've seen her face in a trance, some pictures of it, and indeed it is, if ever there was a demonic trance, just that. And as she goes into this trance, this demon dictates through her. Seth now works also with Bach. Bach acknowledges that in the article in Time magazine. He is a demon who writes. Bach claims that Seth frequently talks with him. Jane Roberts, says Time magazine, and her husband have recorded 6,800 pages of Seth's talk. It is now published in 2 books by Prentice Hall, one called Seth Speaks, and here's the other one called Seth Material. This is a book entirely written by a demon. A woman simply wrote it down as it was dictated to her by the demon. And of course, it just destroys everything that is true in terms of God's revelation. It's interesting, in the first page, some most interesting statements. Late in 1963, Jane Roberts and her husband were experimenting with a Ouija board when a personality calling himself Seth began to form messages. Soon Miss Roberts began passing easily into trances, her gestures, her eyes, her voice borrowed by Seth himself. The Seth Material, this book, is a documented story of how a woman who balked at the idea of life after death was confronted with overwhelming proof. Seth has diagnosed illnesses, correctly described the contents of sealed envelopes and buildings thousands of miles away, and given life readings. He has materialized apparitions in a well-lit living room, continues to amaze students of the occult and professionals alike, and from the very beginning, the text of each semi-weekly session has been recorded in full, and this is part of it. Now, everything we know about Seth indicates that he's a super egomaniac demon. It says in the first part, this book is dedicated to Seth. It's the first book that I know of dedicated to a demon. Now, this woman, Jane Roberts, writes it all down. It's interesting, too, that her husband's gotten into the thing, Rob, and he's beginning to get dictation from Seth as well. This is material from hell, and people are reading this stuff and believing it. People are reading Jonathan Livingston Seagull and thinking it's something beautiful. It's right out of the pit. Incidentally, Seth is going to be coming out with another new book very recently. Now, that's only one little brief sample of demonic literature. It's everywhere.